people with slavery and death.
This is madness!
Madness. This is Sparta!
Hello world historians, and no prizes for guessing the origin of that clip from the movie 300, which is of course where most people might begin when they think about the Persian Empire, and certainly the way that it's treated in pop culture. I think we can argue that Greek-Persian relations were a little bit more complicated than movies such as 300 allow. But there are some interesting correspondences with reality. For example, much of what we really know about this great ancient world superpower, this second wave civilization of Persia, comes from the Greeks. Now, the Greeks were the first people to actually write history that we would recognize as history. Of course, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, even the Persians themselves had chronicles, had lists of kings and battles. But the Greeks were the first people to write history as literature, as narrative, but also as analysis. So they're using critical thinking, they're collecting evidence. Historians such as Herodotus, who was a source for the Battle of Thermopylae between the Spartans and the Persians, or Thucydides, who also wrote about the wars of this time, give us a kind of Greek eye view of the world. Now, one thing that we have to recognize, therefore, is that the Greek sources tend to be biased against Persia. They tend to portray Persia as this great sort of evil superpower. But it was also a state which had no equal really in world history at that time. It was something that stretched all the way from Libya, Greece, the fringes of Greece in the west, all the way over to the province of Bactria, which is modern-day Afghanistan, and the banks of the Indus River, which was the traditional frontier of India proper. So this is a tremendously powerful empire, a tremendously complex empire, and it sort of defies easy categorization or easy stereotyping. So we'll start with the founder of the Persian Empire, a guy called Cyrus the Great. Now this should give you an indication that the first people to refer to Cyrus as great were in fact the Greeks. So again, I mentioned that Greek-Persian relations were complicated. So even though the Greeks themselves had their axe to grind against the Persians, many Greek authorities, including the great historian Herodotus, regarded Cyrus as a genuinely enlightened and brilliant leader, monarch. And one of the great achievements that he was able to carry out was to unite these two different groups, the Medes and the Persians. Now, the Greeks had a great deal of difficulty distinguishing between these two groups, who had similar religion, dressed similarly, spoke a similar language. So we don't have to worry ourselves too much between what was the difference between a Mede and a Persian. You could argue one person's Mede was another person's Persian. But this is similar, I think, in some ways to the achievements of other world conquerors, people like Genghis Khan, who united the Mongol tribes. This act of foundational unification, gathering different groups who were traditionally at war with one another, these nomadic, tribal, totem clan based societies, who eventually go on to conquer the great empire of Babylon. This is a testament, I think, to his leadership abilities. But not only historians, but other world leaders, other writers throughout history have always admired Cyrus in particular as a kind of enlightened despot, if you like. So when Alexander the Great Greek warrior counterpart to Cyrus, actually defeated, put to rest the last ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty, which had been established by Cyrus, and defeated the Persian army, his first act was actually to go to the tomb of Cyrus on pilgrimage. And even in more recent times, Thomas Jefferson, one of the founders of this country, was also a great admirer of this Persian ruler. So why was he admired in particular? I think one of the great insights of Cyrus is to recognize the humility that was required to govern a complex, multicultural, multilinguistic, multi-faith society or state, rather, such as the Persian Empire. And this is best illustrated in 539 BCE, when Cyrus and his Persian army march into the great city of Babylon. It falls almost without resistance, and according to the rules of war at that time, conquered cities could expect not only their leaders to be put to death, but also many of the population, and they could expect rape, they could expect pillage. But Cyrus called back his troops. He restrained them, not only restrained them, but also gave out this proclamation, which we can see still survives to this day. It was discovered in an archaeological dig in the 19th century. The original is in the British Museum in London, but there is also a copy in the Forum of the United Nations building in New York. So when Cyrus walks into Babylon, he announces, "Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has appointed me to build him a temple in Jerusalem." And this is recorded actually in the book of Ezra in the Bible, as well as correlated by this piece of architectural discovery. So this is an extraordinary moment because, of course, one of the things that the Babylonians were notorious for was having captured the Hebrews, having taken them into slavery. And Cyrus is seen by not just his immediate contemporaries, but subsequent generations of Jewish people as being not a conqueror, but a liberator, someone who was willing to invoke laws in the name of their god. And he also issued proclamations in the name of different Babylonian gods. His own religious beliefs are somewhat more ambiguous because, of course, we have the monotheistic faith of Zoroastrianism, as we've seen, that emerges in Persia. But at that time, the Persians were transitioning from their own version of polytheism, which has some similarities with Indian Hindu religion. So we don't actually know what Cyrus himself believed, except that he was tolerant of other faiths. And at that point in history, tolerance of other faiths equated to tolerance of other cultures, other people. So although he's a general, a conqueror, he governs with a light hand. He's not a tyrant. His successor, Darius, now not his immediate successor, but the next great Persian leader, was described by the Greek historian Herodotus as a storekeeper. Now, what he meant by that was not that Darius had a grocery store, but that he was a great administrator. He was someone who understood the complexities, legal, political, administrative, of governing, again, this complex empire. And he contrasted, or Herodotus contrasted, Darius, the storekeeper, with his predecessor Cambyses, who is described as a slave driver. Now, Cambyses is an interesting counterexample to Cyrus, because Cambyses was actually the son of Cyrus, and yet his reputation was much more brutal, much more tyrannical. Cambyses actually invaded and conquered Egypt, but he dies in 522 BCE, and then Darius comes to power basically through a kind of political coup, and overthrows the dynasty. So he's someone who's willing to use violence in the kind of rather cutthroat atmosphere of the Persian Empire at that time, but he also makes some other interesting innovations. He establishes Zoroastrianism, we've already looked at, as the official religion of the state, of the Persian state. And again, this is somewhat of an overturn of everything that Cyrus was about, this policy of multiculturalism, of multi-faith tolerance. Instead, Darius establishes what is essentially the first regime of religious authority in the ancient world. And by official religion, I mean that Zoroastrianism was promoted throughout the empire, that it was given certain privileges, that other religions were disproportionately taxed, were burdened with disabilities, and in some cases actually persecuted. But on a more positive note, finally then, it's worth thinking about Darius as a very able administrator. He built the first road network that went on to become the Silk Road. He also developed, codes of law. The first postal system of the Persian Empire, which was highly efficient. In fact, any one of you who might know the motto of the U.S. Postal Service might be interested to find out this is actually a translation from the Greek of the oath of the Persian messenger. But I think the greatest innovation Darius brought in was to create a sort of federal system for the Persian Empire, and this is described by the word satrapies. Each satrapy or tributary district was governed by a satrap. Now, these satraps or governors were often recruited from the local population, so they were not all Persians. And the one thing that the satrap system enforced was this annual payment of taxes that was sent to the purpose-built, the custom-built capital of the Persian Empire, Persepolis. And every year, if these provinces paid their taxes, they were allowed pretty much to govern themselves. So depending on their wealth or their tax base, they would be expected to pay different amounts. But for example, the wealthy city of Babylon paid an annual tribute of 1,000 talents of silver. Now, a talent is a lot of silver, and 500 eunuch boys. Now, I'll leave it to your imagination what the eunuch boys were intended for. But we also can look at this system of satrapies of federal government as a very astute move by Darius, because he realized an empire on the size of Persia, of that complexity, couldn't be governed with a heavy hand. You needed power sharing. You needed, a kind of federal system. So this goes on then to become a kind of template, if you like, for later empires, including the empire of Alexander the Great, who in many ways inherited from the Persians, and even to some extent the Roman Empire, which goes on, of course, to become the new Persian Empire of the classical world. So this is where we'll finish today, but I just wanted to show you just very quickly the city of Persepolis that was built by Darius, and you can still see the ruins today in the state of modern-day Iran. So here we go, Persepolis, which translates literally as City of the Persians. Thanks very much.